the podcast that I originally had was named the Mixed Plate Podcast. And I was calling it the Mixed Plate Podcast because I looked at myself as mixed race and a mixture of stories that I would be gathering. But I'm changing it to the evolution of AloHā podcast, because when I welcome people into this place, I want it to be a place of aloha. And I also want it to be a place where we're facing face. So alo means forward facing and ha means breath of life. Okay. That when we are exchanging this knowledge and this ha with each other, I'm hoping that it would elicit some kind of healing for other individuals that will be listening into this podcast. So welcome everyone to the evolution of AloHā podcast, formerly known as the Mixed Plate Podcast, a Plowline production. And I'm your host, Dr. Jerry Balarosa Tennell. And today we're going to be talking with Ranice Innocent, a Seattle-based educator whose work is focused on equity, social justice, diversity, and healing.
Yes.
And so that's what we're going to be talking about today. One of the things I'd like to do first, though, before we actually start talking about healing, is that it's important to acknowledge that those of us who are gathering in the Seattle, Washington area, we are on the ancestral homelands of the Coast Salish people. I actually am existing on the lands of the Tulalip people. And so we respect and honor the sacred spiritual connection to the land, to the water, and its people, past, present, and future. And so by acknowledging these lands and their original indigenous inhabitants, we reach back to our own indigenous roots and reflect on the impacts of colonialism in the lands from which all the people come. So we're connected to our ancestors through this connection to land, for the land is what connects us all. So thank you, Ranice, so much for being here, healing.
Thank you for having me. Yes, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here. And I am in the shoreline area bordering Seattle and on the Duwamish, indigenous Duwamish lands. So I wanted to say thank you for honoring that. And I think that's so important too. So
yes, and for being here. And, you know, it's like, I think we both come into this place with, I don't know what it is, this need to heal, right? To heal our country, to heal our own people, but most importantly, to start with healing ourselves as well too. So
absolutely.
Let's talk about that. I know right before we started, I shared with you this little thought that came to. I've been writing a lot. So I actually, let me preface this with, I've been in the presence of Resmaa Menakem for the past 2 weeks on somatic abolitionism. Oh, girl, if you have not taken that, you...
Yeah, and it sounds super intriguing. So, yeah.
It's and he talks a lot about healing, right? And the generational trauma that we all hold within ourselves, and the impacts of colonization, and also for some of us embodying the colonizer and the colonized.
Yes. Ditto. Yes.
Let's start there. Tell me about your identity and embodying those bodies.
Yeah, sure. So hi everyone again. Ranice. I identify as a mixed race brown woman, multiracial, multi-ethnic, primarily half East Indian, Punjab, India, and half white. But within those halves, if you will, there are a lot of other identities that come along with that. I have Cherokee and Choctaw Native American roots on my European white side. And on my East Indian side, I have West African origins and ancestry from Mali, Cameroon, and majority Nigerian roots, so West African and Irish. We learned, and other European roots on that Indian side as well. And so I kind of grew up in this multiracial and family body, and all of my cousins as well are just a lot of mixed with a lot of things: Mexican, Indian, Black Indian, Japanese Indian. So and I am, like you said, on the fight for good trouble and justice work in everything that I do, and teaching with friends and who I allow in my space and in allow to give my energy to, and energy received and all of the things, and in my family as well. So I'm not perfect by any means, and I'm on a journey. I feel like we all should be, but I want to continue doing this work, and not just at work, if that makes sense, like in all realms of my life. So it's the lens that I'm walking through.
Yeah.
Colonizing, like you said. So, yeah.
And that's a lot, right? Yeah. That's a lot. I mean, especially when, it's like walking around, you walk around, your body is a brown woman. And so that's what people see. And we have the tendency to look at the phenotype of the individuals that is in front of us. And then we have all of these stories and all of these narratives that sometimes we can make up about an individual by just the way they look.
Yeah.
But no one really truly understands what is inside of us.
Right.
Until they really want to hear our story. And I think that is one of the things that is that can be hard. But I feel that I do believe that through storytelling, we're able to help others as well too. And so let me I'm going to go ahead and share this again. So this came to me. Pain travels through family lines until someone is ready to heal it in themselves. By going through the agony of healing, you no longer pass the poison of chalice onto the generations that follow. It is incredibly hard. It's scary. It's important, but it's also sacred work as well too. One of the things that came up for me is that in the process of healing, what do I do when I've already served poison to individuals that I love and care for in the process of healing? My healing journey, I feel, just started maybe 25 years ago. And I have children who are 36 and 37.
Hey. They look amazing. Beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you. And but
that's real. Yeah.
It's real, right? It's like, what kind of poisons have I passed on to my kids that they have to deal with now? Right. And then I have grandchildren. And so seeing that and understanding that, it's like,
you want to take back, no, I didn't mean to, instill this in you or that in you. And I think that's where like the disruption can come. Like I know with my family and my daughter in particular and my white mother, I was kind of constantly navigating and trying to disrupt some of that colonialism and white supremacy that was being passed on from grandma to granddaughter in whiteness, I guess. So not super overt, like my mother loved and like loves people and humans and all the things in her granddaughter, but a lot of little things as she was being raised around her hair would be brought up around, why don't you let her straighten her hair more often? Your friend, so, I have a girlfriend who is I don't know how you properly say it, but like on the news and things like this, was doing media. So there was a time where you had to, as a Black woman, straighten your hair. So, but my mom would reference Oprah and these like people in the entertainment world that they straighten their hair. So why, won't you let your daughter straighten? And so I would let her, but it was like rare. It was super expensive and or super time consuming or both. And it was one of those things where I really wanted her to embrace her natural hair and like learn to love that. And just instill that. And like, yes, you can do all these beautiful, amazing things with your hair, right? But that idea of white grandma constantly pouring that in, or even things around skin tone and things like this would be brought up. Like if they were lighter, like had I not married someone so dark, they would just probably have more opportunity or privilege. And like that's that's true, but why would you, you know what I mean? So just saying these kinds of things, just like that as an adult would start to sit with me like, oh, that, right? Like, or just, how does my mom really feel about me? Or, you know what I mean? Or my father, or just those real deep rooted beliefs, right? That we are raised with. And I think all that, I just was constantly like, no, I'm going to, like, this is what we're doing. And, trying to always have the black doll set. I just had a memory from like Facebook around, literally, I found one, but it was like the top shelf at Toys R Us back when Toys R Us was a thing. And, of a black dollhouse family set, which was like things that I would search for and seek out. Because I did not get that. I was not raised with that. I had the white baby dolls, the white children's literature, which I'm super privileged and blessed that I had literature all around me all the time. That was great, but I never saw myself. I never saw myself growing up in the woods of Snohomish, Washington. And I think that journey also of being a child, like a brown facing, the world sees me as brown. You know how when you're young and it's like cute or whatever, maybe everyone assumed I was adopted, which I wasn't, and there's nothing wrong if I was, but I wasn't. And so just kind of navigating and growing up when I was at my mom's home versus at my dad's home, they were divorced at an early age. It was always this like, thing where I would have friends, close friends, who were technically being raised really racist, like with really racist parents, like saying the N-word about just any brown. Then and there, if you were brown, you were basically black. So it's interesting because I know, and so I kind of was, and then as I became an adult, I was like, oh yeah, like people don't. Now I'm not a kid. So now people do, or 9/11 happened, right? Literally. I start to feel even that, like looking Middle Eastern or looking all the different, I'm very racially ambiguous, right? I can look all the different things at any given moment or time to any different group of people.
Right.
Which also has been a journey and a term even for me to kind of grasp and hold on to in my adult learning and through courageous conversations, summits, and some really deep healing work. And so I just realized as an adult, like, oh, okay. So I feel like kind of as a child, I experienced life like a Black child would, or as in regard to like the anti-Blackness. But then as an adult, I'm like, no, I don't have the same experience, right? I have light skin, colorism is at play as like a Black woman, perhaps, right? So just navigating those spaces, being invited in or assumed that I'm half Black, and just like not wanting to, like checking my own anti-Blackness and wanting to honor and feel and be 100% of everything I am, right? And honor that part of my ancestry that my grandmother was raised being lied to, saying that she was Hawaiian Polynesian just to not be Black, because back in the day, in her day, anything Polynesian included, as I'm sure you're like well aware of, was white. And so they could pass, so they did. And her legal name was changed to Lawai'i. In order for her, because her dad was East Indian as well, but her mother was a mixed race Black woman in the 40s and 50s, or 20s to 50s. So in the US. So it's interesting too, because I have that immigrant experience side of my family from my grandfather's side of Punjab, India, but then from my grandmother, all on my dad's side. It's a very, lineage of enslaved people's story and journey and narrative from the US and being Black in America. So it's fascinating.
It's very fascinating. And, it's like Lawai'i is, it's a beautiful fern in Hawaii. And I remember growing up, it's like when you say Lawai'i, my sister and I would go up into the mountains and pick Lawai'i so that she could put together her hula skirts and everything like that. And so Lawai'i is a type of fern.
I did not know that. Thank you for sharing that with me.
Yeah.
That's awesome. She played in like Hawaiian movies and everything. Like, I'm not kidding. Like that's how.
And it's funny because, it's like being Pacific Islander, being Polynesian, like you were saying, being ethnically ambiguous, right? It's like if I'm down in Los Angeles, people would mistake me for being Mexican or Hispanic. Yeah. And then it's like have people treat me differently.
Yeah.
Until I'm like, I'm from Hawaii. And then they're like, oh my gosh, I love Hawaii. Hawaii's so beautiful. And then all of a sudden it's like I become acceptable because I'm from Hawaii.
Yes.
Right. And so it's like that's that's some stuff that we've got to deal with. And
oh, yes. Yeah.
And then hearing your story is so fascinating on how your grandmother navigated these spaces.
Yeah.
And she navigated her spaces. Did she do it because she wanted to be Hawaiian, or did she do it because she knew that was a way for her to survive and thrive and be accepted into a place where it would be difficult?
Yeah, I think her mother forced that on her and her siblings. So for her entire childhood, that's what it was, because that's what mom said it was. And that was, yes, in order for assimilation, in order for them to navigate spaces and rise through the education, be able to access, I should say, the education system and all these other systems, and therefore be quote unquote successful, in their eyes. And I used to be angry at the loss of our language. I used to be angry at all these things. And now I just honor it, because I know that that's what they felt, that my ancestors felt they had to do at that time. And it's kind of given me the ability now to show up unapologetically, right, and speak about all of these things. And so as an adult, I don't believe my grandmother continued. I think she 100% knew and reconnected even with her father. And I think claimed herself as whatever she was, but I don't know, because she didn't ever. My family stories have taught me that the first time she ever admitted or acknowledged her Blackness was on her deathbed, when she was getting dark spots coming out in her body. She said, "Oh, that must be the African in me." And so that was her first time admitting it. However, she raised all of her children in LA, and she was super racially aware. I joke, I know it's like a silly story, but Mariah Carey and Paula Abdul were big in my home, at my dad's house growing up. My dad loved them. And so my grandmother was around, she would live with different, children. And at one point when she lived with us for a while, and left LA to be up here, which she hated it. She hated it here as far as the weather and a lot of things. But she would say "Oh, that Black woman," regarding Mariah Carey. And I'll never forget, as a child, I was born in LA, but raised here. So I had a very narrow Pacific Northwest mindset. And I say that because I would visit my cousins in LA every summer. And my cousin, who was being raised in LA, was always around everybody. And she literally would bring me around friends that looked like the world. And I was mind blown as a child. What's Egypt? What's Egyptian? What's this? I didn't know what it was. Right. And even though I had some, not of East Indian, right, which some people had no idea what East Indian was, out in the woods out here. So I had a little more lens than others, but nothing compared to my cousin. And so when she said that about Mariah Carey, I was in my head, I remember wait, she's Black. And I know, she's half Black, she's mixed race, but I, later learned that, but I just didn't see that. And I didn't know, but my grandmother knew. She knew. And I think about those dots connecting with her own personal journey, of knowing what she knew about herself. And my dad and others would always say their Nana was a Black woman. They knew that. So there was definitely an awareness, I believe, as an adult, but not wanting to acknowledge and having shame. So I think because they were taught to, her and her siblings were taught to not speak of it, not talk about being Black, not be Black, that therefore it just turned into shame. And that, what do we call the IRO, right? Internalized racial oppression, which is real for a lot of people in general, but let alone with that kind of heavy of a background and story. So, yeah.
How did you navigate those narratives as you were growing up? How did you overcome it, or how did you address it? How did you face it?
I kind of also love people and humans. And so as a younger child, I would be emotional and sad. I had a kid once yell at me to get off a swing and go back to Africa. And I'll never forget, I think I was around 4th grade, and I'll never forget, in my intellectual child mind, right, with a not fully developed everything brain, thinking, wait, aren't I from California? So the whole, where are you from? Mm-hmm. And I knew I was born in California. And so I thought, I'm so confused. I just remember being confused. And then I knew I had these Indian side of side of the family. And so I would cry, and then I would move on. And I had friends that loved me deeply, and they didn't know what to do, of course, especially then, but they just like would hug me and like felt bad and knew that there was something unjust about that, right? Or unjust about that. So, but nobody really knew what to do. So I think I always just I've also been through 3 open heart surgeries. And I just say that because I feel like that's given me an ability to persevere. And I think just have this resilience about me. And I think that the resilience piece played a role as I continued to get older and navigate applying for jobs and just navigate my high school setting. And I just kind of tried to have a confidence about me, even if I felt insecure. I don't know if that makes sense. And so in high school, it was Bothell, which was not much better in regard to not being ethnically or racially diverse. A lot of assumptions. And at this point in high school, I was literally, on my A game. I was teaching piano for a job, trying to put gas in my like little 1980s car that was handed down. And, I didn't care that it was old. I was just so happy to have a car and go work and go have fun. And so I was like dressing very professionally and, just was beyond my years, like wise old soul. Like I say about my son is a wise old soul. And I think maybe he got some of that from me. And so I'd be 16 and people would think I was graduating college or whatnot. And the way I carried myself, and I'd have the president of the high school, walking down the hallway. I'll never forget when he, yo, what's up, Ranice? And I don't have a relationship with him. So he's not a friend of mine. And I remember just rolling my eyes, like, what about how I look, I'll never forget feeling that, makes you feel like it's okay and want to say, yo, what's up, Ranice, right? And like, I'm not in my middle school days where I was wearing baggy clothes all the time. You know what I mean? Like I'm literally dressed professionally and on my, like making all the good choices, going to class, getting my grades, participating in, BAD, which was Bothell Against Discrimination. And so I just kind of tried to honestly, I just was so excited to get out of Bothell as quick as I could. That's all I'm going to say. I was like, let me get out of this super white space and place. And I went to North Seattle, which wasn't that much better, but it was definitely better. Yeah. So that's how I navigated until like adulthood hit. But yeah.
And the nuances that comes with all of that, right? I know growing up in Hawaii, everyone looked like me and everyone was family. Mm-hmm. We would go to the grocery store and even with strangers, right? It's like we would acknowledge our elders as auntie and uncle, mm-hmm. even if we weren't relatives, even if they were complete strangers at the gas station, we would be like, hey, uncle, do you need help? Auntie, did you need something? Right? We would care for each other that way.
Right. Right.
And then I moved to LA. I went from Hawaii to LA. And I was young when I went to LA. I was probably like 18, straight out of high school.
Okay. Yep.
And I didn't know anything about this racialized identity until a white woman came up to me. She started to speak to me in Spanish. I told her that I don't speak Spanish. Mm-hmm. And then she looked at me and she was like, you don't speak Spanish? And I'm like, no. And then so she said some derogatory things about being Mexican. And she goes, well, at least you're not that. Right? And I'm like, okay, so then there's the seed. That was the first seed that was planted into my head. Yeah. Yep. And then she was like, well, you're definitely not a N-word. Right? So that's another seed that I've never heard before. Wow. Be stuck into my head. Wow. And then she's like, then what the hell are you? And I was like, what? And I'm 18, right? Yeah. Straight from Hawaii. Yeah. I've never left the boundaries of my island. I feel like, what the heck? And I'm like, okay, human, I think. That's the way I checked I was human. And I was like, well, she goes, well, where are you from? And I'm like, I'm from Hawaii. And then her whole attitude changed. Yeah. And the partner that she was with changed as well, too. Like, oh, we have a condo in Maui. Oh, my God. I so love Hawaii. Again, another information that I needed to process as an 18-year-old. Yeah. Trying to figure out, like, what is all of this? Oh, you got quickly exoticized. That's what they would do to me too. Like, you're so exotic. And like, that was a good thing. Yeah. Yes. And so, and then that's the narrative. Yeah. That is a narrative that I adopted. that, okay, well, I don't want to be this and I don't want to be this. So
Right.
I will be this exotic human being,
Yep.
this exotic woman of color from Hawaii.
Yep.
And I acted it out.
Yep. Sure. I have
Right?
to. I've acted that out. Yep.
I acted it out.
Yeah.
And then being very weary that when I was decided to go back to school in California, and I was around a lot of Black and brown people, I didn't consider myself brown. I wasn't a person of color.
Yeah.
What? I'm from Hawaii. And then being really careful, like, oh, I don't want to associate myself with those people.
Mm.
And I had no clue. I had no idea.
Yeah. Yeah. It's fascinating because I think because I was around so much whiteness, I like jumped at any chance I could get ahead. So literally saw a friend, well, who became a friend when I was visiting my mother's school. She was a music educator. And so I'd go to her school on my school's breaks and literally like making a connection with, and she was at a really all white school too, another brown girl. And I like literally felt like, brown girl, like, yes, brown girl, right? And like literally built a friendship from that interaction of just seeing each other, her walking in her class line and just, right, needing that almost affinity to that other person or connection to navigate these spaces. And then she was connected to a church in the Central District in an all Black church, pretty much. I mean, it was diverse, but it was majority Black. And so just like being so and feeling so accepted, you know, and not like they knew I never lied. Like, then it was just like, I'm East Indian and white and like super unsure about this whole Black thing in my family line that we kind of talked about and didn't really talk about. And so it was just one of those things where I like, you know, gravitated towards other folks of color because of that. And within that, I would be told those same messages, like you're saying, like, you know, being like exotic or whatever, you know, the comments about hair, right? Like, I'll never forget my girlfriend. I'm actually going to her wedding in June. We were in 8th grade, a different girlfriend, but she's Black. And she would, I want to say it's the first time, because my other friend who I was just sharing with you, she was mixed. And so she had a lot of hair, even though it was mixed, you know, Puerto Rican Black and whatnot. And so, but this other friend of mine who's Black, I'll never forget being in her house, staying over and like watching her get ready one morning. And I was there with her. She like had pulled out her hair piece for her ponytail that she was putting in, her fake hair. I think that was my first time. Like I grew up with my hair, which was always super thick, which none of the hair products worked for me. My mom didn't understand it. I was always frustrated about that. And then my cousin, who's like Black and Indian, was like, you don't have thick hair. I have thick hair, you know, but I'm like, no, but I do compared to everybody else around me. Right. And like, so I was on like that journey, but I had never witnessed that. So she pulls out her hair and I had cut my hair. I tend to still grow my hair really long and then I cut it for like a couple of years and then I'll have it long for years. And so I had cut my hair short and I'll never forget my girlfriend's mom coming around the corner and was like, you cut your hair? Don't you know we pay for hair like yours? Like, right? Like, why would you cut it? And then like later watching documentaries, right, on good hair. I think it was it Chris Rock's, I think, Good Hair documentary.
Oh, yeah.
And that was like, whoa, like I knew Indian hair was a lot of what was pushed into the Black hair salons and whatnot and beauty shops, but it's really deep around even like, is there even consent in taking Indian hair sometimes off of children? Like a whole nother level, right? So all that to say, I went through a lot of that stuff and a lot of being exoticized a lot. And yeah, I think held some, right, like you're saying, some privilege in that, or some took advantage of that in certain ways, that poison you were talking about in some ways. And so, and not acknowledging the hurt and pain. I even had a parent my second year teaching, but I was in Seattle, and it was really upsetting. She did something, because I guess you can legally do this as a parent, to check my credentials, make sure that I was highly qualified. And I got like a letter basically saying that someone had, you know, and so my principal told me who, and like that she had done this check and wanted to like, and I was like so mind blown because I was like, I couldn't have even applied for this position without having been highly qualified and having all these things at this time. Like my Western Washington school program was really strict about that already. So I remember those hoops and this being this big buzzword in the school system. And I didn't even understand what it would mean to not be highly qualified, I guess is what I'm saying. And so I then realized, felt what you were saying about Mexican people, about indigenous people. I then realized, I don't know how and what other nuanced conversations we had because she also wanted to be all up in the classroom and volunteering all the time and make sure her baby was okay, of course, as a kindergarten parent, first time, which I dealt with that a lot. But she was extra, and she was of Asian descent. So I want to add that in there. She was of lighter Asian descent. I don't remember exactly where she was from. And so she held a certain privilege about her, and I believe thought that I was Mexican and was looking down on me or that, and feeling like I was not educated enough perhaps to teach her child or worthy enough to teach her child. I think I realized that because there was some kind of conversation that came out about my identity and my roots being more East Indian, and the big, oh, like you're saying about Hawaiian, right? Literally, like, oh, then you're okay, because then you are probably an educated background or whatever. That's how it all went down, though, and it felt. And I was like, ew. And then you're right, those stories and those things, like you're saying, those seeds have definitely come out, and like we collectively look down on, right? Anybody with the darker skin, Southeast Asian, Mexican, like Indigenous Native Americans, like Black people, African people. So I feel all of that. And I'm like, and why is that? And then like we've talked about before, then people go put their kids in these bilingual classes and, you know, and it's like this very amazing, beautiful thing. But yet when you come from that and you're brown, it's a whole different experience.
Right. Yeah.
So how fascinating is that? Right.
Yeah.
And I have an uncle through marriage that is Mexican and from Mexico City, and has his own journey and story around that. So it's like I have family that's
Yes. And there's just so many nuances that exist within being this mixed race. Even, you know, I mean, I've heard of, in my own family, right? It's like if someone marries a white person or a person that's really fair, oh, their babies are so beautiful. Oh, look, the baby has blue eyes. Oh, this is my favorite one. This is beautiful, right? So I'm like, it's like there's this, they idolize the whiteness without even knowing that they're idolizing it.
Right. Yep. They don't know. I have a colleague a former colleague who's from Hawaii, from Kona, and she is on her own journey, but I will share that she shared once that she goes back often, and she said her mom, so she, I think, was realizing what you're saying about the messages fed to us growing up. Her mom was out in the garden or whatnot, and they actually have like Kona fields there and all of that, but something like that, and had her sleeves on, like long sleeve on, but like lightweight. And my colleague didn't, her daughter did not, and she said, why aren't you covering your skin? Your arms are going to get dark. Like, you don't want to get dark, right? And that whole idea of how here everyone wants to get darker, you know, or the white, I should say, population goes tanning to get like that whole conversation. And I'm just like, it is so mind blowing, right? Like what's acceptable, what's not, and what's viewed as pretty, or you know, all the things better. And in Indian culture, it's the same, right? Around like it's more acceptable to marry a white man than it is a Black man. And you know, if you're not marrying an Indian. So yeah, there's a lot around colorism. And so, yeah, even with my colleague, she's like, oh, I didn't even, you know, I guess I did grow up with all these messages of, and kind of like talk down about her own Hawaiian people at one point too. Like, well, there was a fundraiser. I'll tell you why. There was a fundraiser at our school here in the Shoreline area called Big Kahuna. And the whole theme was a big kahuna and this big, large visual of a Hawaiian man. And there was like the big kahuna awards and like all the things, you know, for the, and it, I believe, is gone now because of the conversations around cultural appropriation. But when that came up, was kind of the spark with my colleague of, she's like, I don't see anything wrong with it. Like, herself as a Hawaiian woman didn't see anything wrong with it. She's like, that's what we say about people in Hawaii that are like that, or all the people that are like kind of in the sense of like a lot of uneducated folks, a lot of labor workers, it sounds like all of these things. And I just am like, so much internalized like oppression going on. I didn't say that exactly, but I was thinking it. She married an Australian man, and kind of got out, right? Went through education, the university. So she's not one anymore, right? Like that's how it felt. That's how I perceived it. And I was showing people, but I understand that that's people's journey. But so it was interesting. I think it was after that she had shared, her mother had shared that experience about making sure she was covering her arms to not get dark. And I think she was just starting to like sit with some of the messaging.
And it's a
I was like, it's still not okay. Yeah. Even though you're Hawaiian saying it's okay, I still don't think it's okay that we do this.
Right. And it's going through, decolonizing your mind is a lifelong journey, because it's like 400, 500, 600 years of conditioning.
Yeah, right. It's centuries. That's so true. It's so true. And I think my main message was like, that's like, if you say that in Hawaii, all these things, but we are a white school, like a really white school with a lot of money profiting off of this messaging. And that was the biggest issue.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's like, you sharing that story, it really reminds me of a few years ago when I was just getting into my master's degree. And I went back home to Hawaii for it was kind of like a class reunion.
Okay, yeah.
And I went home and I was like really proud because I was accomplished, right? I finished my bachelor's, I was getting my master's, I was doing well, I was living in the mainland, I left the islands, I did all of these things.
Yeah.
Colonization is so insidious. It shows up when you don't even freaking know that it's going to freaking show up until somebody tells you about it. And then being willing to sit with that, right? Sit with that shit.
Yeah.
So I'm proud of myself and everything. And then I go back home like maybe 2-3 years later and I want to get together and nobody wants to get together with me. I'm like, what the hell's going on? What's happening, right? And a friend of mine, he's pretty much like my brother. He comes to me and he says, you know what? Nobody's going to come and see you, sis. And I'm like, why? And he's like, because you leave the island, you go to the mainland, you get all of your education and everything like that. You come back and you talk down to us. And you talk to us like we're stupid. And I just kind of like looked at him and I was like, at first I'm like, no, I didn't, right? Defending myself, right? Having that whole defense mechanism. No, I didn't. I did not do that. I would not do that. And then the other narrative is like, well, you all just jealous because you guys didn't like leave and you didn't do all of this, right? Again, reaffirming my whiteness, right? My superiority and all of this bullshit stuff.
Yeah. Yep.
And then another friend of mine heard me speak at an event. And she came to me, and it was a weekend-long retreat that I did. She came to me, and she wasn't my friend at that time. And she's like, "Hey, let's go to lunch." And I'm like, "Okay." And she's actually a professor at one of the community colleges, and she says, "Hey, so I came to hear you speak," and I'm like, "Well, you heard me speak. You spent the whole entire weekend. I'm so happy that you're there." And she says, "Oh, no. I didn't hear you speak. What I heard was you regurgitate what the white man taught you."
Oh, ooh. She was already woke, huh?
And I was like, ooh,
ouch.
Hold on here, right?
Yeah.
I need to process this.
Yeah.
So I took what she said and I took what my best friend said in Hawaii about me coming in.
Yeah.
And then I had to like replay everything that was going on. Right. And then I had to do research on what's going on. And I remember the third time when I went back home to Hawaii and I'm landing in Oahu and I'm looking at the island and I see where I grew up and it was in the projects that was way back in the valley and then had to question, wait, hold on. We're way up in the valley, but then yet it's my people, it's my mother and father that is coming down from the valley to serve these white people.
Right.
And these white people are the ones that's telling me that, come, it's okay to be here. You're educated, you're smart. And then it switched.
Yeah.
And then I was like, oh.
Yeah.
What the fuck have I done?
How to be in both spaces or multiple spaces, even with your accomplishments, so to speak, and your degrees, you want to feel proud of and be proud of. You put so much work into, but then, what it can do. And changes you. Yeah, I've been there. Been there. Yeah.
Share about that. Tell me about that.
I guess just in times needing to humble myself, right? And reminding myself that my degrees don't make me, and my experiences and others, right? That idea of like being street smart too, and not just, right? And so I think I've put myself in enough spaces, in diverse spaces, not even enough, I've just been in spaces where I've been checked before, so to speak, that way, where someone has like, just because you're all educated or you have your degree doesn't make you an expert, or, in XYZ. This has been a while. It's been a minute since that's happened, because I try really hard to navigate that in, I don't want to even say humble way, but where I'm dignifying people no matter what. So I think that as you know, we have learned, like we do, that's the tricky part, right? You need so many titles behind you just to get that seat at the table or be the table. Learning, the more you learn, the more you know, decisions that affect people and people groups and marginalized and oppressed groups. Those decisions are made at these high up levels and in these leadership spaces across the board, from healthcare to the justice system, law enforcement, right? University, education world, all of the systems. And so that impact people or that people have access to really easily and or don't. And so that's important. And I think it's important that we say, like I recently said this in one of my intersectionality trainings. I said, we often over-intellectualize the work. And I heard that, I think, from a great friend of mine, Dr. Marion Smith Jr., and so who's a mentor of mine. And like even the term intersectionality can feel like this big term that people are just like, what's that? And scared to ask or scared to Google it or whatever it might be. And really, it's just all of the things and intersections and pieces of us that make us us. The piece is that the more, obviously, well, I shouldn't say obviously, for those people that don't know, the parts of intersectionality that are more like, if you're a woman, you're a person of color, you're disabled, you're coming from low socioeconomic status, things like this. So classism, all of the ableism, all those things impact us. So the more of those pieces that intersect us, the less access we might have, the more barriers might be in place, right? So the more oppressed we might be as humans. And that's what we're trying to teach or inform, I suppose, like a white, able-bodied man, so to speak, who just doesn't have a lot of those intersections. They might, but they don't, often don't. So, or if they're gay, the LGBTQ plus community, right? Like all of those things are intersections. So I said that, like, we over-intellectualize the work. We often also don't just listen. And so I've even taught teachers that and staff that, because teachers also, and that's just the teacher world, but that's also, like, in my opinion, a very colonized world, right? With colonialism. And white supremacy. And so, they like checklists. We like checklists. We like, I love my organization systems, all the systems that I know comes from a little bit of this, right, individualistic world and white supremacist world. And so, but when I was leading a lot of race and equity work with the staff, they just want the action. They want the action. Even when I would share so deeply how it's not about action, I would share great artist, Christian Page, who's a phenomenal spoken word artist and educator and leader. I would share his work, and there's so many little gems and nuggets in his pieces, but I'm just like, I don't know that everyone's catching them the way that I catch them. And so, or hear that. And so like about the idea of hearing people, specifically people of color, that's what we were talking about, keeping it about race, experiences and listening to them. So they may not have the words or all of the buzzwords and the, bias and this, all these terms, right, of bias and equity and all the things to say, yet they may have just been trying to tell you they experienced racism in their own way, right? So to listen. And so your action step is to listen. And a lot of people still just really had a hard time grappling with that and did not like that. And so I would give, some practical checking your resources, checking your curriculum, checking, whose narrative is it, whose narrative is not there, who are we leaving out in the conversation, your books, right, and imagery, and do you have books of affirmation for your especially darker skinned children that might show up in your classroom, all of these things. So I would give some action steps that way that I knew about. I teach it with my son showed me during COVID, showed me his middle school social studies book, which, our curriculum has been updated over the years, but still isn't there and still is often created by white conservative Mormons and or Christian groups. Sadly, it's true, right? And so I know that because I've done that level, that digging of that work, but it was very much so about Native American, people and all of the genocide that took place in his book. And it wasn't to, I think, to a person that isn't immersing themselves in this work, I could see it just being fine or not being that problematic. I think what he paused and brought, look, Mom, he knew it was problematic because it just kind of posed the white man as this savior kind of narrative in one of this passage, and the Native Americans like retaliated and then killed all the white men in this one scenario. And I want to be like, but we're not talking about why, right? And so, right, like there's these action steps of pointing this out as a teacher. You can point this out and have that conversation if this is the curriculum you have to go out. And I also did post that and share that with our district, like, hello district, like why, and can we please, there's so many amazing online resources too that we could pull from. I know they, don't like to sway too far out of the curriculum, so to speak, but I think that that's really important work to be doing. So all of that to say, I believe that listening is super important, and ways of combating my degrees and my titles is to acknowledge that we have to sometimes, intellectualize this work a lot in order to push through and get through these systems and to have a seat at the table. And remember though, that people all around you are real people sometimes, right? And they might not have the degrees that you have, but that doesn't make them any less worthy of being your friend, let alone just having an encounter with them. So,
Yeah, exactly. And, it's like, you talked about how our degrees either, it opens doors, it's access, it's either have a seat at the table or be the table.
Right.
And I think the power within that is, it's like we talk about code switching.
Yes.
That's the power of code switching. It's like, all right, so if you want me to be intellectual and speak in front of a whole bunch of professors and utilize my degrees and the language that you taught me,
yes,
I'll go ahead and tell you this. And I will also, in the language you understand, will bring you to the understanding that this is all colonialistic ways.
Right.
And, it's like, and at the same time, uplifting the voices of our people.
Yes.
Right. It's like, having my PhD, it only reinforced that there is much more that I need to learn.
Yeah.
Isn't that just phenomenal? It's amazing, right? It's like it's like, okay, I have my doctorate. What'd you learn? That I don't know nothing. There's so much more for me to learn.
Yeah.
That is what I learned.
Yeah. Yeah. I haven't gotten my doctorate degree. I keep playing around with that idea, but I have a friend, another friend, not Dr. Smith, but Dr. Monique Liston, and I think she's from Milwaukee. I want to say, but we brought her in here for we as in the district and leadership in district has brought her in, Dr. Tanisha Brandon Felder, our equity director, and I got to be at some trainings with her. And she has she does some beautiful work. And, but she shared a story of when she got her PhD and I think it was her dissertation. Is that what it is at the end?
Mm-hmm.
And something happened where they didn't like approve something at first. And she had poured her all into it, all the things. So she basically was sharing the story of like not loving her title of doctor. And like, I think now she's starting to use it a little bit more, but she's definitely been on her own journey about like not introducing herself that way, not wanting to use it. And I could see, just because of my own struggles with the degrees that I do have, of that being a challenge. And she said part of why, though, was because the second time she had to redo whatever the dissertation, I guess, or whatever the work was, she said that they literally, it felt like they didn't even look at it the second time. They like barely looked at it and approved it. And that as if, now she's good. And she's basically was just sharing, like, I want to get by on my own merit too, right? And like on good, like, I don't want it to just be just because I'm Black, like you have to, right? And I've gotten hired that way, and literally heard colleagues like say, oh, thank God we finally hired someone of color. So I was like grateful, but I also was feeling like, but I have the degrees too, right? I have like questioning my own expertise and resume. And I'm like, did you only hire me because you needed to like finally, walk your talk, which is good if you're walking your talk finally, right? It's that mixed bag of emotions. And I hate that. I would love for that to not be part of, right?
Let's just fill the diversity quota.
Right.
Yes.
And I wanted to be on my own merit too. So I understood that part of her story and her journey in regard to doctor. And so, yeah. Ooh.
Yeah, it is. When I hear other people, acknowledge me or call me like Dr. G or whatever it is, there's still like this, there's this tinge though, that happens inside of my body where it's like, what is this?
You felt like you had to get that.
Yeah. I mean, it's like I worked so hard to get here, but then it's like in the process of all of this is knowing that yes, it does come with power. It does come with privilege and access and opportunity. And it's also a responsibility. It is such a big responsibility because there's, we could easily fall into the narrative that was given to us a long time ago about whiteness and ride on the coattails of it. To where, because I did all of this and I'm here now, everybody else need to just pull themselves up by their bootstraps and come along because I did it. You're not really addressing how the hell did I get here in the first place? Right. And so it's like when we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, there's something that has to go deeper, because we can't talk about DEI work if we don't talk about white supremacy and the construction of race. And we can't talk about white supremacy and the construction of race if we're not going to talk about genocide. And we can't talk about genocide if we're not going to talk about colonization. And so all of these needs to be spoken about and taught, or we're going to be spinning our wheels around DEI by thinking that the system is broken, when the system's not broken. The system is doing exactly what the system was built to do.
Yes, 100%. It absolutely is 100%.
And so it's like now we're in this position where it's like, oh, okay, I'm the safe brown person. I'm from Hawaii. So it's like, in your mind, Hawaii is all about love and aloha, and she's going to be easy to talk to.
And you're the exception.
And I'm the exception.
I don't want to be people's exceptions. Yep.
And then when you push back on that system that doesn't really want to change, it's like, okay, so... let's do this in another way, right? And being able to have those conversations, and it's like everything that you talked about, just about the listening, and it's like listening to what's happening in your body. It brings me to the acronym of AloHā. that, it's like it's part of, that I created through my dissertation. So aloha, like I was saying, aloha does mean love and grace and compassion and empathy, right? That's what love means. Love also means hello and goodbye. Mm-hmm. But then when we break it down to alo, forward facing, and ha, and when we engage in these conversations, some of the conversations that we have that we need to have with individuals is not going to come across with what other individual would feel like love and compassion. Mm-hmm. When we're talking about white supremacy, people are going to be like, "Oh, I don't want to talk about that. I'm not a white supremacist. I have a Black friend," right? Right. Mm-hmm. And so we've got to be able to ask questions. So the first A in the acronym of AloHā is to ask questions and inquire. And not just ask questions and inquire of the other person, but ask questions and inquire about your own self, right? Checking your own biases. Yes. And then the L is to listen. And really listen with the intention to understand the other person's story, not fall into their story, but listen to their story, where they're coming from. Right. And the O is to observe the somatics in your body. Yes. What's coming up for you? And if something is coming up for you that could activate your autonomic nervous system, your somatics, then you should be questioning, what is that is unhealed within me that is triggering it? Yes. Right? And then that's the O. The H is the heart. The heart focus, to lead with your heart. Mm-hmm. And then the A is to acknowledge and adapt. And that's everything that you just shared.
That's beautiful. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, if only we could change our education systems to have these conversations and start with the adults, start with our own, like you said, that internal heart and heart work, I like to call it.
Right, it is. It's, and then it's like in my signature line, I have the hard work of equity evolves into the heart work of liberation.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, that's so good. And I think I think that's one last thought about liberation is like, I think of liberation in kind of two ways or twofold, of like personally feeling liberated and that idea of feeling and being unapologetic. Like I chose to step down of being a district equity lead. I'm still on the committee. I'm still in the spaces. I'm still learning and growing in ethnic studies work, but I'm not leading that work anymore, that committee in our building, by choice, so that I can feel and be unapologetically me, because I was dealing with that not working out, the intersections of those two things not working in my building and with my colleagues, So I think about like personally feeling liberated and being liberated, and then that I acknowledge that collectively we aren't, right? Worldwide, globally speaking, liberation has not come yet. And those images of there's all those various images of equality versus equity, of the fences in the baseball field or whatever. And there's that one, I have this one where it's like liberation with no fence at all. So in that, I've shared that idea that like true liberation would honestly be rewriting the entire US Constitution, or would need to be. It would be that deep, and we're not there yet. And I don't know if we'll ever be. So how do I navigate and feel personally liberated and free, as free as I can be within this society, but acknowledge that we aren't collectively liberated.
Yeah. So, you just inspired me to actually say it publicly, that I am stepping down as my position as director of equity for the school district. And that whole thing about being liberated without offense. There are so many boundaries and barriers when you are placed in a position, as I was holding, where I was not able to do the work. That potentially I felt like I was hired to do. And it's, it's difficult. Sometimes it's a difficult choice. And so I'm choosing for myself to be liberated from that, to continue to do the work where I can be unapologetic.
Yes. Snap that to that. Oh,
Sis,
Wow.
it's scary as hell.
So real. That's so deep. Yeah. Yeah. I can imagine. Yeah.
It's scary as hell because, it's like, ooh, all right, so what do I do now?
It's all you've known, right?
Right? Where do I go? where do I go? What do I do? But, I mean,
yeah.
We need to.
It's
we
brave.
need to
That's
be.
brave. Yeah.
Ooh, I'm like, ooh, it's like these wings got to fly somehow, right? It's like,
word. Yes.
the only way he's going to do it is like, mama bird is just going to push you out of the nest. It's like, you better fly.
Yeah.
You better fly.
Yeah.
And I felt that, I felt that. I felt that, it's like ancestors were like, girl, come on now.
Yes.
Come on.
Yes.
You want to speak truth? Ooh. You ain't going to be able to speak truth here because you've got finances that is going to be occupying and shutting your voice down.
Right.
And so I'm like, oh.
And where you have to make yourself less than, right?
Yep.
Or smaller. And that's hard.
Yeah.
That's really hard. Even other just great leaders in general, right? I think it's difficult when we recognize that, even with like great, amazing white, ally leaders, where you just recognize kind of that greatness, I think sometimes. And you think about even those, your own peers, maybe your colleagues that like could just be doing so many, like, and then you look at some of the white men in place sometimes and you're like, how did you get here? And it's like even more like, wait, with maybe 1 degree or, and, or just not right. Just not that great. And that is hard. That is really hard. You're like, oh, this is how those things happen with presidents. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Because if it's this easy at this level,
right.
Oh,
right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
No, I feel you. I feel you. So we're just about an hour. So what other things are you doing? What other things that you're doing to co-create a more beautiful world?
Outside of teaching, reading to kindergarten through 5th graders, and I'm also facilitating national board work. That's a whole nother status, quote unquote, status thing and work, that teachers do if they want to pursue that. So I'm facilitating that work. I'm taking ethnic studies, which has actually been a really beautiful healing experience. And I was told ahead of time that it was something I wouldn't need to go back and lead, or it wouldn't be anything, it'd be from my own like learning and healing too. And so I was like, okay, I'll participate in that. And so that's been awesome. And then within our union, we have educators of color affinity group that just during COVID, we just hadn't been able to meet, but that's coming back up again. And I'm really excited that we get to meet in person for that. We also have affinity spaces in our district separate from the union, but that's only been on Zoom still. And then we have the PSESD, so the Puget Sound Educational Service District, which includes Shoreline School District, has an educators of color leadership community, which I recently got word that we get to meet in person in June again, and we just haven't. And that's such a beautiful healing space. That's where we met.
Yep.
And so I'm excited for those spaces in particular, and when I can make it, and my schedule is busy. But then I also, separate from that, am doing, it just came up because I'm associated, our friends own Black Coffee Northwest coffee shop up in Shoreline, and they have additional space now. And my friend had just said, hey, do you want to do anything like just meetups or whatever? Do you want to? So what came to me from that was educators of color, coffee and chat. But I didn't want to limit it to just Shoreline because there's so few of us. So I was like, why would I do that when we have all these surrounding school districts where I know there's other affinity, right, spaces and just educators of color needing and wanting to connect. So we've done 2 of those so far, and I'm going to hold it. And it's just my own capacity and ability to kind of host. And the very first one was so beautiful. It was like 15 people from all over. And it was literally like, I didn't want the plan, right? I didn't want to have a plan. And I'm a planner, but I wanted it to just be just space, just hold the space,
Organic. Yeah.
And I got to treat, there's an anonymous donor from the community who donated money. So I was able to treat people with a free coffee, and it just literally organically turned into beautiful conversation. And the only thing I inserted at one point was I hear that some of us are involved in our equity work within our various, whether private school, public school, and some of us aren't. And I want everyone to know it's okay if you're not, or that you're not. And I think that was important in that moment. And so people just had I had someone from Marysville in the house, and like someone who had moved from New York and had her teaching certificate, but couldn't, it was just a pain to jump through the hoops of our Washington state trying to be certified here. So she ended up at a private school. And I was like, oh, we're losing good people of color, to those barriers. So that's a whole nother, journey. So anyway, so it's just beautiful. I have one more coming up at the end of May, and I'm working with the city of Shoreline also. I have some friends that work for the city. So they're also helping treat people again in light of Teacher Appreciation kind of month, right, for May. And it's the last one that I'm going to do for this school year. So I'm doing that, and I'm excited about that. And
do you have a date yet for that?
Yep, May 21st.
May 21st.
Yeah, at 1 p.m. Yep. I have a Facebook event.
Okay.
Or I can send you if you want.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I'll go ahead and share it. And even though it's like I'm not technically an educator in a school district, I'm still an educator.
Yeah.
Once an educator, you're always an educator.
Yeah. No, and I actually included staff. Like I put staff so that it's because we know how many paras are up against. Right? We have a lot of paras of color that aren't able to get their degrees for various reasons. And so I have purposely included just like staff, like just in the education system and world of color. So, and I purposely reached out to a couple of our paras to say like, hey, you're invited to this too. I know the big label is educators, but you're an educator too. You're with
absolutely.
So.
Absolutely. They are.
Yeah.
They are.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Ranice. This has been very inspiring. And hopefully, it's like whoever listens to this podcast will find some power in your own mixed identity, right? And the opportunity to find that healing within the chaos as well too.
Yes.
And so, yes. Any last words?
Yes, therapy is important and wonderful. And if you can find a therapist of color, great. I know that is difficult. And that's another system we are trying to impact, and actually currently are having conversations all over about with that. And so I just wanted to put that out there, helping right with whatever that looks like, Indigenous practices, energy work. I've kind of involved myself in all of that. I had a Black naturopath at one point I was doing cranial sacral work with, meditation, yoga, whatever it is, nature, connecting.
What is cranial sacral work? What is?
Well, I can't tell you the exact definition, but it's different than acupuncture, but it reminds me because, acupuncture, you are using those needles for it, but purpose is redirecting energy. Yes. And so with cranial sacral work, and some people might feel like, they don't believe in it, whatever. And I felt like it was just healing. So there can be no verbal conversation happening with your practitioner or doctor, or there can be where you're talking. It's almost like a mini counseling session, or it could be. And my doctor was able to literally feel if my liver was hot, I guess. But just by having our hand above certain areas of my organs and so identifying what that means, and whatever I need to unpack. So it's very much the idea that your emotions and whatever stress might be going on, traumas, that is impacting your body and your nervous system, like you talked about.
Yes. Yes.
And so she's done things and like pressure releasing on my forehead. I don't really know all the things. I just believe in it, and that it was therapeutic, felt healing to me, and redirected that like negative energy or bad energy, right, to help, I think, just release, right, that idea of releasing the toxins and all the bad energy. And so, and I'm a believer of Jesus, so I love intersecting all of those things.
Absolutely. We have a tendency to separate and demonize things that we are not familiar with.
Yeah.
Right. And it's like, there's so many different things. It's like, oh my goodness. And I believe in energy work, right? I do believe in that. I do believe in alternative, non-Westernized ways of healing.
Right.
And that is, Reiki, I think, yes, Reiki. Yeah. And so it's like, I do a lot of work around the Institute of Heart Math Resilience work, and which is energy work, showing, understanding that we are all energy, and that we can actually feel each other's energy.
Yes.
And, it's like Sherry Mitchell, she's a Native American attorney from Maine, from the Penobscot Reservation. And she talks on how our words carries this resonance.
Yes. Yeah.
So our words carry energy, right? It's like, how do we feel when somebody yelling at you or says negative things to you? Yep. It impacts you. Those seeds that I spoke about, that was put into our heads.
Yeah.
So we've got to, we have to move and redirect that energy. So that way, when we are coming to this place of healing, we're doing it ourselves. So it's like this loop that we're creating.
Yes.
Or we could get into all of that stuff.
It's another podcast. That's a whole nother session.
Absolutely. But thank you so much for sharing your story and sharing this Saturday morning with me.